welcome to all of you who are here now for this webinar called Trusted Advisor Abuse. And the purpose of this webinar is to do two things. One is to introduce a new concept
Wow.
concept.
What a fiasco.
Sorry about that, guys.
I can't hear anything.
Sorry about that. Who is not able to hear? Because I can definitely hear you. Whoever said that, the fiasco. And I apologize for the fiasco. So are you able to hear me now? Are folks able to hear me now? Okay. Okay. So to introduce a new concept, right? A new concept of an old form of perpetration. But today, hopefully, we'll be able to start to identify what this form of perpetration is, which is called trusted advisor abuse, and name it in order to start a prevention process. So I want to welcome all of you to today's webinar, and I super apologize for any of the technological difficulties. So I also want to thank many of the interns who have worked on the Trusted Advisor Abuse Project over many years. It really started back 2 years ago with Lorena, who really helped me get the website started and started collecting a bunch of cases. She is now off to medical school, so very able to identify trusted advisor abuse in the healthcare system at this point. I also want to thank Sarah for all of her work related to trusted advisor abuse, and she's really helped us along the way. And then I also want to thank Sydney, who's on technology, and honestly, if you have any technology issues, Sydney's going to be able to figure it out. She figured out that snafu, as a matter of fact. Thanks, Sydney. I appreciate that. And then I also want to thank Natasha, who's this year's summer intern, and who is going to be working a lot on trusted advisor abuse for the rest of the summer. So everybody's remote. Everybody's working in particularly challenging circumstances right now with the pandemic. So I just want to thank all of you for being here. And it was definitely not our intention to make it technologically difficult, but that is what happened. So hopefully today's webinar is going to be worth it. So I want to dedicate today's webinar to all the strong voices of survivors who have endured trusted advisor abuse on the regular, maybe even daily, and maybe even for generations and centuries. So trusted advisor abuse, as I mentioned before, is really an old form of perpetration, but we really haven't had a specific name for it that I'm going to introduce you to this new name. But it's also mixed into racism and many other forms of perpetration. And the better we're able to uncover these perpetrative mechanisms, the better protected we all are. So I really want to dedicate today's webinar to all those who have survived this, often in silence or in confusion or in conflict, or maybe even all by yourselves. So primarily, we have a website. The website was originally called Complaint Web, and you'll see some, I can catch a little pen right here. Let me get it. Here's a pen, magenta. So you can see right here, here's a little vestige of our original idea, which was called Complaint Web. And we really wanted to help people to be able to complain about professionals or volunteers who were engaging in unethical or maybe even illegal behavior. It mutated over time into Stop Trusted Advisor Abuse, and we've really started using this phrase trusted advisor abuse and an acronym TAB. So if I mistakenly say TAB, that's kind of how we've developed trusted advisor abuse as an acronym. So I do have a little clip, and I want to play this clip because I think it might be hard to hear, but I think it really explains trusted advisor abuse. Oh, let me see. No.
And sorry to interrupt. Before we begin, my name's Sydney. I'm here for tech support. I've already put my email in the chat. So if anyone's having any issues, feel free to email me. Also, this webinar is being recorded. If you keep your sound off, you won't be seen, but just so that you're aware. And feel free to comment or send questions in the chat, and we'll make sure to get to them.
Yeah, and Sydney, Natasha, I'm noticing that we didn't get the little clip, voice clip there. So I'm not sure if we can get it, but basically it does a really good job kind of explaining what trusted advisor abuse is. So it is a website, and I'm going to walk folks through this website. And the way that it works is, first of all, on the homepage, we have an explanation of what trusted advisor abuse is. Honestly, I'm going to talk about that for the rest of the webinar. So this is just a kind of walkthrough of what the website looks like. And we've got what it is. We also have a resource that we're going to send a link to you in the chat box, which is called Can Spirituality Help People Recover After Trauma? And it also talks about trusted advisor abuse. So it can be used a little bit as a brochure, and we have that in a PDF format for you. We also have a page that's reasons to consider a complaint, and I'm just going to go over some of these reasons. So any kind of sexual contact, violating patient confidentiality, providing services for which the individual has not been trained or licensed, drug abuse, fraud or other crimes, false advertising, paying or accepting payment for patient referral, unprofessional, unethical, or negligent acts, focusing therapy on licensees' or registrants' own problems rather than the patient's problems, serving in multiple roles, having social relationships with patients, lending them money, employing them, this kind of blurred line stuff. So, that is but some of the more common reasons to complain about trusted advisor abuse, but understanding trusted advisor abuse is going to really kind of bring us to this awareness as well. So we have a lot of resources on the website. We have a lot of, I'll just make it really large right here so folks can see it. We have reported cases of trusted advisor abuse. Natasha, I want to thank you for updating that on the regular. There is no dearth of these cases. Sydney and I were talking before we realized there was a technological snafu, but we were talking about the fact that these are actually cases that are reported in tabloid newspapers. Sometimes they get to the New York Times level. Sometimes they get to the New Yorker level, but they're often kind of, they're so common that they're maybe even, used in an exploitative way. And that might be even part of the problem. We have a section on knowing your rights. Knowing your rights as a consumer, knowing your rights as a patient, knowing your rights if you have disabilities, knowing your rights as a citizen or as somebody whose feet are on this soil. That there's a lot of rights, but that means that we actually have to know them all, which is kind of a heavy load. Also, we have compiled, I'll just click on this. Lorena back in the day did a lot of this work. Sarah also did a lot of this work, that we have links within California to how to complain. For example, about medical doctors, about RNs, physical therapists and psychologists rather, chiropractors, drug treatment, occupational therapists. The list is very long. So one of the things that we really want to do in stopping trusted advisor abuse is encourage people to make complaints. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So we have a little bit more. We have advocacy groups that are fighting abuse within their various professions. There is SNAP, for example, which are survivors of people of priest abuse. There's a lot of these organizations. What ends up happening is that these organizations are fighting, priest abuse, for example, or, coach abuse, for example, or, elder scams for abuse, for example. So it becomes disjointed. Trusted advisor abuse, you're going to see, is a form of perpetration that actually is an umbrella over these various disciplines, if you will. Once we understand that, then we can see it. But these groups are doing great jobs, and sometimes there has to be that kind of concerted effort within an institution or a system for sure. There's also additional resources that we found along the line and decided not to throw it away, but give it back to folks. And then we also have some past webinars. So we will be editing today's webinar to make sure that some of our snafus in the beginning are missing, but that the content still remains and people will be able to review this information. Also on the tab website is the spirituality handout for survivors, which can be very helpful. All right, so it's a great website. I'm super proud of it and am looking forward to hearing from all of you about your experiences, either navigating the website or working through some of these issues related to trusted advisor abuse. So feel free to contact us. This is a free resource. This is a public resource. It is focused on California. However, if you're coming from a state that is not California and you would like to focus on Utah or focus on Nevada or focus on, something in Canada, I'm happy to give you a copy of this website so that you can just put in those local resources. So we really want this to be a free, publicly available, used resource. We have our spirituality and trauma handout. And then also that, I'm really going to encourage folks to check it out and give us some feedback. It can be very helpful for folks. So we did that tour. And we do a lot of advocacy here at the Center of Excellence for Trauma-Informed Care related to trusted advisor abuse. We're sending out some letters to Chelsea Piers. There is a gymnastics case within a private club in New York City that we are reaching out to them to alert them to trusted advisor abuse. We have sent letters to the U.S. representatives on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, Save Sports, U.S. Gymnastics, and we have a form letter that we're also going to make available to folks just in case you want to give people or your public officials more information about what trusted advisor abuse is. So we consider ourselves to be an advocacy, public information, free resource for survivors and for systems who want to prevent or intervene in this abuse as quickly as possible. All right, so trusted advisor abuse, what is it? Trusted advisor abuse is a form of perpetration that is similar to domestic violence and different from domestic violence. It is similar to workplace harassment, but it is different from workplace harassment. It is similar to sexual assault, but it is different than sexual assault. So it's interesting because trusted advisor abuse is a puzzle piece in understanding dynamics of perpetration that at least up till now did not have a name for it. And it really wasn't until we had the names domestic violence, workplace harassment, sexual assault to describe forms of perpetration that we were able to actually see them. And trusted advisor abuse is the same. So trusted advisor abuse is where there is a person in a position of trust, whether professionally they're getting paid for this position or voluntarily they're not getting paid for this position. So it is a workplace scenario. There is some work being done, there's coaching being done, there's teaching being done, but it's through a mechanism of trust. And this mechanism of trust is what makes it a different form of perpetration. Although once we understand trusted advisor abuse, you're going to be able to see there's trusted advisor abuse in domestic violence, trusted advisor abuse in some workplace harassment, trusted advisor abuse in some forms of sexual assault. It's just going to give us another layer of understanding these dynamics. So the position of trust ends up being, at least one way to think about it is having 4 layers of trust, right? So I'm going to grab my pen. And on the first layer, which is the outermost layer, is trust that society gives the perpetrator, right? So what I mean here is that society says coaches are great people, teachers are nice, nurses are trustworthy, faith personnel are, godlike, that there are these large messages that tell us who to trust, right? And keep in mind, our societies also tell us who not to trust, which is another kind of interesting flip to understanding trusted advisor abuse, right? But generally speaking, where trusted advisor abuse proliferates is in a society where there are few protections for victims in the first place. And if there are any protections, they are hard fought when they're there. And unfortunately, the thing with hard fought protections is as soon as people start fighting for them, the protections go down, right? So we still see these few protections, even when there's hard fought victim rights, even when there's supposed to be victim notification, even when there's supposed to be, public information like, lists or updates or who knows what kind of things that are supposed to be out there. That are hard fought by victims to be there to protect other victims or stop perpetration from happening, those then start to wane and they kind of disintegrate back upon themselves. And as a matter of fact, in these societies, most protections are actually for the perpetrators. That the perpetrator's livelihood, the perpetrator's constitutional rights, the perpetrator's reputation, right? The perpetrator needs protection. So I'm just going to ask folks to go to the chat box right now and for Natasha just to let me know what folks have to say, which is, are you familiar with any aspects of a society where there are few protections for victims and the protections that seem to be in place appear to protect the perpetrator more than the victim? Can anybody think of any systems or even cultures or any specific examples of that kind of imbalance? So Natasha, I'm just bringing you on in here.
Yep. Hello, everybody. So we have Sydney, and she said Catholic Church moving priests.
Okay. Very good. Catholic and many other religious organizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Taking the guilty, protecting them, right? Moving them around. They serve no time in jail, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And meanwhile, the victims are kind of left there to bear the brunt. Great example.
Yep.
Anybody else?
Another example from Carla Cross, definitely schools and youth sports.
Yes. Exactly. First of all, this university, the University of Michigan, oh, we have to protect Larry Nassar. We have to protect the reputation of the gymnastics program. We have to protect, these coaches, right? And meanwhile, the victim is kind of left there alone to bear the brunt. Thank you very much for all those examples. Natasha, do we have another one?
I think that is all for now.
Okay.
Yep.
So then there's another layer of trust, right? It doesn't stop there, guys. There's another layer of trust, and that layer is on the community organizational level, right? So, coaches are good. Athletes need to behave, right? We have these large messages across societies and systems and cultures. And then we have some communities and organizations that then give this perpetrator trust, right? Here in Santa Cruz, we had a situation of a pediatric neurosurgeon, right? A pediatric neurosurgeon. So we already see the society, systems, and culture. He's a doctor, right? He's a pediatrician. Oh my gosh, they're great people. A neurosurgeon. Oh my gosh, that's even more amazing. And then the community here in Santa Cruz was like, oh my gosh, Dr. So-and-so, he is a pediatric neurosurgeon, so the community, the organization in the hospital, oh, we have Dr. So-and-so, he is a pediatric neurosurgeon, that's why he gets to have all this access to children. He's a pediatric neurosurgeon. So generally speaking, the community, right, sees the abuser as good people, who would never do such a thing. And the community, the organization, which is actually providing access, right? It is the community or organization is the arm, if not the hand, of the abuse. As a matter of fact, if we go back here, USA Gymnastics said, this attorney said, USA Gymnastics may not have been the hand that ultimately abused these innocent children, but it was definitely the arm, right? So these communities and organizations, they see the abusers as good people who would never do such things, and they claim ignorance or that they tried to do something, but they didn't. And as a matter of fact, they are accomplices in many ways, but they're also weirdly, to think about it this way, but they're victims as well, right? Because they're being manipulated, and they're ultimately going to be the ones that are left holding the deep pockets or the reputational responsibility for what has happened. So these claims of ignorance or claims that they tried to do something are really disingenuous in terms of self-preservation, but especially in terms of the lack of protections for the children or the victims or the athletes or the parishioners or whoever those victims might be. So we have another layer of trust to unpack here. And this layer is the relational layer. So the relational layer is that as a patient, I trust my doctor. As a parishioner, I trust my priest. As a athlete, I trust my coach. As a yogini, I trust my yogi, right? So, there's a relationship there. And very often this trusting relationship is something that I'm deeply committed to. And that has a lot of community, organizational, society, cultural meanings within this relationship as well. However, the relationship is, by its very definition, an imbalance of power. It's not a relationship, folks. And even though it feels like a relationship, even though it feels this interpersonal dynamic that's going on, because of the imbalance, it actually doesn't meet one of the primary definitions of what a relationship is. A relationship is a voluntary connection between two people who get their needs mutually met because of this, right? And if they're not doing that, then they can voluntarily disconnect from this relationship. As soon as we have power imbalances, like a coach and an athlete, or a parishioner and a priest, or a doctor and a patient, or a financial advisor and an older adult, as soon as we have that kind of a relationship with an imbalance of power, calling it a relationship is going to make things a lot more complicated. And as a matter of fact, for us, all of us who are learning about trusted advisor abuse, when talking about it, I'm going to really encourage folks to really consider, when they use the word relationship, is there an inherent imbalance of power in this dynamic? And if there is, calling it a relationship might actually confuse the situation. Well, what do we say instead? Well, the phrase that I use is a safe connection, right? That as a therapist or as a coach or as a teacher or as a police officer or as a judge or as a yoga instructor, that you are a safe connection, that you are connecting this athlete to their sport. You are connecting this client to their mental health. You are connecting this parishioner to their own spirituality, right? So it's not really a relationship. And calling it a relationship is part of the burying of the perpetration aspects. So interesting. I want to check in on that one, right? So let me check in on the folks who are on the line. Please go to the chat box. Any thoughts about that? That when we call any kind of an imbalance of power, two people, right? Two folks who are interacting with each other, where there is an inherent imbalance of power, calling that a relationship is more confusing than clarifying. Any thoughts? So I'm going to bring Natasha in and just ask her first. Natasha, any thoughts about that concept?
Yeah, I definitely believe that calling a relationship that certain type of like power dynamic a relationship is damaging. Um, both especially to the person who has less power um in that connection.
Yeah.
So definitely.
As a matter of fact, Natasha, in these kind of imbalances of power relationships, who probably realizes that there's this imbalance? The person who has more power or the person who has less power?
I think, especially in a case of trusted advisor abuse, the person with more power realizes their power over the victim and in case like uses that against them.
Absolutely. And does the person with less power perceive that they have less power in this situation?
I think in some cases they might not,
Mm-hmm.
which makes them feel like what is happening is okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm going to say that that confusion is because of this word relationship. That the word
Mhm.
relationship makes it hard for the less powerful person to perceive the power imbalance in a way that makes sense. So instead, the person blames themselves, right? When I don't see this power imbalance for what it is, I'm like, oh, I didn't say anything. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. You know, it's interesting because that imbalance of power then puts the burden on the less powerful, which doesn't even make sense. So, did
Yeah.
anybody say anything in the chat box?
Yes, we have a comment from Lucy Price. But how do you apply that to family situations, for instance, parents over children? Is that then not a relationship?
Well, the parent-child relationship is a unique relationship, and it is definitely a relationship. It is not, it can have aspects of trusted advisor abuse, and I can even give you some examples of that. But for us to just understand trusted advisor abuse, we're going to really see that trusted advisor abuse is a professional or a volunteer who's been put in a position of trust. Now, a parent, yes, they've been put in a position of trust over their own child, right? Or over the child that they're caregiving. However, the parent is in legal and financial responsibility to that child. So there's a different dynamic that's going on, in addition to the biological, in addition to the parental child kind of bonding, neurochemical bonding that's going on. The parent is legally, financially responsible for the safety of this child. And what we can see, however, is where a parent-child relationship is not safe, often there's aspects of trusted advisor abuse. And for example, I might think of a situation where there's a parent who has a very good reputation in a community and might even be engaging in outside the home trusted advisor abuse, but then uses his or their authority from outside in order to say, you have to do what I want you to. Sometimes you can see that where the parent takes on also a religious authority, for example, right? They take on a religious authority as well. So now they're not just father, they're the father in many cases. So what we're getting into here is when we have a lot of this overlap, we get into extreme forms of perpetration, right? Cult-like behavior, extreme forms of perpetration. So thank you very much for that question. The parent-child relationship is a unique relationship, and understanding trusted advisor abuse is going to help parents understand the uniqueness of the parent-child relationship, and that uniqueness can never be given to anybody else. And if we give that uniqueness to a coach, if we give that uniqueness to, I'm thinking of Jerry Sandusky, for example, giving them kind of a in loco parentis authority, without really understanding trusted advisor abuse, we can get into some serious danger. So thank you very much for that question. That's a great one. Natasha, anybody else?
That's all for now.
Okay. All right. So the less powerful is made to feel more responsible, and the more responsible, as a matter of fact, the responsible party is given all kinds of excuses for why they didn't have to come and report to the police, or why they did what they did, right? And then fundamentally, and here I'm really talking about the victim here rather than the perpetrator, but the victim here has some unique characteristics as well within this. And one is a deep desire to trust somebody. And, as a matter of fact, I'm going to ask people to go to the chat box one more time. I have a question for you, which is, why would somebody who's been abused, why would somebody who has been mistreated, why would somebody who has a yearning, right, for being significant and meaningful, why would that person feel that trust is something that is a beautiful gift and really, really important? So why would the trauma survivor feel that trust is almost a cure to the past? So Natasha, I'll bring you in, and any thoughts yourself, and then you can let me know what the chat box says.
Yeah, that's a really good question. What do I think?
Well, yeah. Why would somebody who's been abused in the past feel that trust, like being able to truly trust somebody, to really trust that this person is so trusting that I can really trust this person, that is going to be, if you will, a cure to what has happened in the past?
Yeah, I feel like victims of abuse, if they've never had that feeling of security or trust before, then that's definitely something that they look for in any relationship, or in a relationship like this, for example.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if anybody's coming onto the chat box, and I'm wondering if, even at the moment of abuse, right, or the moment of violation, or the moment of all of these kind of things, there's a hope that somebody's going to come, somebody trustworthy is going to be able to come stop this. Somebody trustworthy is going to be able to intervene. Somebody trustworthy is going to fix the problem. Anything from the chat box?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so we have a few comments actually. We have a comment from Bray Anna. What about a mentor? Coming from a mentoring background, I have heard we need to build healthy relationships with those being mentored. Would you change that to safe connection as well? I'm just wondering how that will work with those that need to learn about healthy relationships. And it is almost a privilege to be trusted and have trust in our society.
Yeah. So great comment, by the way. And can folks see how when we critique the relationship, it's a foundational shift? Like, what about parent and child? What about mentor and mentee? What about this and that? What about all these really important culturally, socially, collectively, all these assumptions that we have about what a relationship actually is? It kind of comes out. So, I love these kind of questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we also have a comment.
But hold on, before that comment. Yeah.
Okay.
So just 1 second, Natasha. Sorry about that. But here's my question is, what sounds better to you? The person who asked me this question, was it Brianne? The person who asked me this question, what sounds better to you? A mentor is, a mentor-mentee relationship, or a mentor is a safe connection to a mentee, right? And what is the mentor connecting the mentee to? A career, I guess, or, a skill, or, a talent, right? So keep in mind that when we use the word safe connection, safety comes into play, and I'll talk more about that. But the other thing that comes into play is, what are you connecting me to, right? Are you just connecting me to yourself? Or are you connecting me to a career? Are you connecting me to my faith? Are you connecting me to my school? Are you connecting me to my sport? Or are you disconnecting me from these things? Sorry, Natasha, there was another comment.
Yeah, we have two more comments. One from Sydney. We are taught by society we should be trusted if we are quote unquote good. And one from Nancy. Yes, I agree. And just a hope of finding someone to trust.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So, folks, if I say that trust is a collective idea of a rescue, of a good person, of a hero, of a savior, would folks agree that trust is what we all have been taught to want to be, and to want to receive, and to want to give? And as a result, we are often blind to some of the dynamics inherent in trust. And, what I can say is that perpetrators are very aware, like Natasha said. They're very aware. They might act like, oh no, you and me, we're friends, Natasha, right? We're friends. You can tell me anything. Call me, don't call me doctor, call me Ted or whatever. We're just the same. But the perpetrator knows perfectly well that's not true. And that this trust business is actually getting in the way. Now, does that mean that trust is a bad thing? No, it doesn't. It means that we need more concrete understandings of safety to be able to even assess whether a person is trustworthy. So trustworthiness is the product rather than the vehicle, right? So I just wanted to ask, especially the person who asked about the mentor-mentee relationship, how about you? What do you think? Do you think the word safe connection kind of clarifies the situation, or does it lose something in the translation? I'm curious to hear. So Natasha, let me know if, I think it was Brianne who mentioned the mentor-mentee relationship. So the victim is vulnerable. Now, the victim is often vulnerable because of their own life experiences, right? But can we now see that almost everybody has a vulnerability if we don't have a critical look at what trust is? Or what is it to be a trustworthy individual? If you're not safe, there's no way you can be trustworthy. And yet, so many people who have been trusted have turned out to not be safe. So we're really kind of bringing in the safety business in order to build trust upon it, rather than thinking trust first and then safety ensues. So the victim, however, does have moments of vulnerability individually where they want a hero to protect them. But what often happens is that this hero turns out to actually be harmful. So now how confusing is that, right? So here I am, I'm hoping for somebody to trust. And then here's this person who I trust, and then they turn out to actually be harming me. That's almost too much to bear. It's almost too much to bear. And this is a dynamic that you find in all forms of perpetration, right? But what we specifically are trying to uncover here with trusted advisor abuse is how trust becomes part of that dynamic. And then here's the kind of end game, which is the victim blames the victim and the perpetrator blames the victim. Society blames the victim. The community blames the victim. The victim blames the victim. The victim's other relationships blame the victim. The organization blames the victim. The community blames the victim. The culture blames the victim. The system blames the victim. And the society blames the victim. And if everybody's blaming the victim, including the victim, right? Including the victim, then it seems pretty clear it's the victim, but it's not the victim. So what I'm almost saying here is that because there are so many layers of trust, so many layers of this fabric of trust, that it's super, super difficult to understand trusted advisor abuse without investigating the relationship and trust. And that is almost too much to bear, right? However, if we're given a name, trusted advisor abuse, some of that emotional work has been taken away. So, let's think about it this way. Before the word trusted advisor abuse, what did we call it? What was it called? I don't know how many of you have had these experiences, but I'll just give you one of mine, and it's a relatively mild one too, which is I was doing study abroad in Rome, Italy, and there was an art professor, and it was the summer, so school had ended. He was technically no longer my professor, and I think I ran into him. He had a scooter. He said he would drive me back to where I was living, and that was actually really nice. So thank you very much. And then as I got off the scooter, after kind of holding on to the person, after I got off the scooter, in Italy, you give 2 kisses, or at least before coronavirus, you would give 2 kisses. And he kind of like lunged at me for a kiss, right? And I was just like, whoa, 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 whoa. But what was that? Was that a pass? Was that, what was that? I knew that it was wrong. I knew that there was this imbalance between teacher and student. Even though we were no longer teacher and student, there was still that imbalance. But I didn't know what to call that. And if you look just in this slide, for example, this is about a coach, and all these people are saying something about this guy, right? I'm writing as a concerned parent. I feel that some of the things that are going on with WSU are completely out of control, right? Some of the things that are going on, no words for it. Or this other person, football, phone calls to chew players out at 2 a.m. Sunday morning, the sand pit, turning fire hoses and knocking players down, constant belittling. I wouldn't have played for Leach. Sooner or later, you're going to get sued over Leach, right? So here's this guy, almost sounds like an insurance assessor, or like maybe an investigator of some sort, just the facts, ma'am. You're going to get sued. Don't you realize that this isn't okay? But what is it? You're going to get sued for what? What are you going to get sued for? Or, as I transition out of day-to-day football coverage, I want to reiterate my concern about player health and safety, which we have discussed at various times over the past 9 months. As you know, my concerns revolve around certain practices of the coaching staff that put the health and safety of the student athletes at risk. In particular, these practices include punishment workouts that are dangerously excessive. Thank you for your continued help in these matters. So you can kind of see here, this is almost like a formulistic, CYA, kind of like, as I'm transitioning out of this job, I want to wash my hands of it. You know what I think about it, but what? About what? These concerning practices, punishment workouts that are dangerously excessive. What is that? Is that athletes? Is that athletics? Or is that abuse, right? What is it? So trusted advisor abuse occurs when a person in a position of trust, such as a teacher, a faith minister, a therapist, doctor, nurse, treatment provider, lawyer, coach, yoga instructor, or financial planner, uses that position of trust to abuse and control a patient, a client, a parishioner, or an athlete. The abuse is typically relational, whereby the person abused feels a special bond or connection to the trusted advisor. Betrayal of this person may seem worse than the abuse itself. Trusted advisor abuse is cloaked by societal messages and expectations, expectancies about trust, what it is, that it's good, who to give it to, who to get it from, right? And who should be trusted. people in authority, people who are well respected, people who are well accomplished, right? I've got degrees up here, you need to trust me. You know, I've got a shingle outside, you need to trust me. I've got letters after my name, you should trust me. You know, I'm a doctor, trust me. Trust me, I'm a doctor. As I mentioned before, the cases are everywhere, you know, and as a matter of fact, they're often used as kind of a salacious, voyeuristic kind of fodder in National Enquirer kind of magazines and, you know, the New York Post and stuff like that, until it hits another level. And then maybe the New Yorker will pick it up, or the New York Times will pick it up. But they usually don't pick it up at the beginning. They usually pick it up at the end. So here, I'm going to bring in Natasha, because we're going to soon have a couple of examples of these cases coming in, which we're going to talk about. Natasha will be coming up to go over some of these cases, but you can see we have police, we have yoga, we have self-help, we have professors, we have faith personnel. It really stretches the gamut. If we stay within one field, we don't see the larger forces of trusted advisor abuse. So in order for us to do something about trusted advisor abuse, there's 4 layers. You know, to kind of intervene. So first, on the individual level, this is for you personally, or for your children, or for, you know, your clients, or for, you know, giving information to your friends, is for each individual to know their rights, and to inherently understand their right to dissent. The right to dissent is the fundamental right. It's only when I'm able to dissent that I can actually give my voluntary consent. But again, society comes in kind of stopping people from even realizing dissent. That's the primary right. It's just so, you know, uncomfortable to dissent. It's just so rude to dissent. It's just so unladylike. It's not good form. You know, athletes, you know, don't complain. On the individual level, for you to have skills, the skills to speak up, the skills of being able to connect your feelings to what's going on in the environment, the skills of being able to set boundaries, the skills of being able to, you know, speak to somebody about your concerns. Folks need information. They need information about what trusted advisor abuse is and what to do about it. And then, you know, probably first is increased awareness. For you to become more aware yourself of trusted advisor abuse, and how often we use trust as our main vehicle, and that sometimes it fails us, even when we're very good people, even when we're very safe, right? That when I use the relational stance to get my kids to do something, to get staff to do something, to get neighbors to do something, to get spouses, whoever it is, right? To get somebody else to do something for me, there's a form of trusted advisor abuse going on. And the more I'm aware of it, the more I can even see my own, you know, lack of awareness beforehand. Am I using trust as a shortcut, or am I actually giving people their rights, building skills, providing people with information, and increasing awareness? So it keeps the professional very much in check. On the relational level, right? So if we're an organization where we're providing students, athletes, clients, patients, parishioners, you know, any yoginis, you know, whoever we're providing, there has to be good training on what trusted advisor abuse is. Because perpetrators do not turn into perpetrators. Perpetrators turn into yogis. Perpetrators turn into priests. Perpetrators turn into coaches, right? So we have to say real clearly, hey, we know about you, and we're going to train everybody else to know about you. So this is not a conducive environment for you. Clear expectations on, if you see something, coworkers, and you do not report it, that is a breach of your fiduciary duty, right? So clear expectations. Not only don't abuse, but also speak up, right? But we, again, have to know what to speak up about. Trusted advisor abuse. I feel that there's some trusted advisor abuse beginnings going on. Boom, we're on the same page. And to train staff, volunteers on the reporting process to make it very, very clear. And the best way for me that clarity is as a really good infographic, right? A question mark, is this trusted advisor abuse? Here's who I go to. This is what I do. Has anybody here, and I'll bring Natasha on, has anybody here ever gone through a process where you complained about somebody and you ended up either getting fired or kicked out of the organization or something like that? I'm just wondering, has anybody ever gone to an official complaint process, lodged a complaint, and then subsequently gotten fired or gotten, kicked out of the organization? Anybody? Or do you know of anybody who did that? So, I often find that, and even if it's not there, there's this like societal message, like if you do complain, if you do use this reporting process, then you will be seen as the problem, right? That whistleblower law to protect people from actually doing it. So what tends to happen is that the organization tries to quash complaints. But instead, even if it's quote unquote unfounded, right? Something happened, and that's an opportunity for us to actually increase training and clear expectations. On the organizational level, transparent procedures. Show me your procedures. We define trusted advisor abuse as a violation of all of these things. And if it happens, this person will be fired, cease all contact with, athletes, and police will be alerted, right? That this is what we do. It's clear and it's transparent, and this is how we do it. And this is not really to catch the guilty. I mean, yes, it is to catch the guilty. Sorry. This isn't to catch like false guilty. This is really to say, let's get these reports in and really look at what's going on. And even if nothing abusive is going on, something needs to be clarified. And then on the societal level, of course, we need some laws. Laws that really require a lot more coordination and a lot more collective action than the United States typically has seen its cultural preferences to be, right? So we have a disparate number of school districts and competitive sports and parishes and dioceses and stakes and all of these things. It's all very disparate, right? That's the American cultural approach. But on the societal level, what we need are laws to get rid of perpetrators and to hold systems accountable. All right, so I do have a lot more information, but I think we'll go over first to our first case. And I'm going to bring Natasha in to talk about the Pennsylvania Catholic Church case.
Thank you, Gabby. Before I do that, I just wanted to talk about some of the comments in the chat box that we didn't get to. Yeah, so about your question before, Gabby, Sydney said her boyfriend's father was fired when he complained about his boss's boss. And Carla says not fired or kicked out, but labeled as a troublemaker and then blackballed from benefits.
Okay, well,
so
yeah.
That's one thing, yeah. But to move on, I'm gonna be discussing 4 different cases of trusted advisor abuse that come up in the media. And our first case, we have Pennsylvania's Catholic Church. Okay, so the US government launched an extensive investigation after numerous victims came forward. And what they found was that there were over 1,000 sexual abuse allegations spanning 7 decades against 300 priests in Pennsylvania Catholic churches. And the way they carried out this abuse was through church-run orphanages that were basically breeding grounds for abuse, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the globe. And one reason for why they really got away with this was because of the lack of oversight and accountability, right? So no one was monitoring the priests, monitoring the orphanages. So the institution kind of allowed for this abuse to happen because of that lack of oversight and accountability. So after the investigation, they were ordered to pay their victims compensatory damages. And while some victims, right, they felt a sense of closure and relief, other victims still felt that, the compensations, the payment resurfaced trauma, negative memories and emotions. And we have one survivor that actually, he says, money cannot fix or undo years of abuse, rape, and molestation, right? So even after, the compensations, these victims still had to deal with their long-lasting psychological trauma at the hands of these so-called trusted religious personnel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
wow, Natasha. I mean, that's such an intense case. It just it takes my breath away, honestly.
mhm.
Over 1,000 allegations over 7 decades. But can you see how it had to penetrate all those societal, cultural, organizational, community, relational, and individual messages about trust in order for it to finally be looked at as a what sounds to me like a coordinated syndicate of abuse, right? Unbelievable. And we're not throwing just one faith under the bus here. There's actually a lot of organized religions that have trusted advisor abuse, because the perpetrators are going to see and hear all those messages about trust for faith personnel, and they're going to put themselves in these organizations, guys. So if you are from a religion, or you are part of a religious organization, learning about trusted advisor abuse is going to help your congregation, help your faith connection, right? So rather than going through 1, 2, 3, 4, Natasha, I'm going to go back to a slide, and then I'll come back to number 2 if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we can see that with the Pennsylvania case, right? We want to strengthen laws related to reporting and investigation. Pennsylvania has done that because they had the Sandusky thing, they had this Catholic Church thing, they've had quite a few of these kind of cases, and they have improved their laws. But the patchwork of the 50 states plus territories, is not the kind of collective action that actually stops trusted advisor abuse on the societal level. Society is responsible. So, we can see religious culture in the case that Natasha went over was responsible on many levels. The overall messages about the value of parishioners, right? The value of orphans and the people who are involved in helping orphans. Natasha, societally speaking, and, let's look back 7 decades, right? Let's look back maybe even 100 years. What kind of strong societal messages have we all gotten about orphans and how valuable they are to society?
So definitely, I believe, orphans are part of a marginalized and vulnerable community, which is why, we see in this case and also many other cases, those are the people that are targeted as the victims.
Yeah. And so here's these orphans. So, best case scenario, what I'm going to say is that orphans are seen as, kind of needy and maybe, a cost to the public purse, and that's honestly kind of the nicest things that I can, think of the societal messages about orphans. So if orphans are needy and they cost a lot of money to care for, what if there's somebody or an organization that cares for orphans? Natasha, what does the society say about their value? These people who are working with orphans.
I mean, I imagine an institution like that, again, wouldn't have a lot of oversight, or wouldn't be monitored as much.
Because they're good people, right, Natasha?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Look at what they're doing for the orphans, Natasha. How can you criticize them? Look at what they're doing for the orphans. But can you also see when I'm saying that as a community member, that I'm not taking any responsibility for orphans, right? for the protection of children who are vulnerable. So, there's this collusion aspect when we don't hold people accountable. That's very uncomfortable when we get down to it. And, these messages may seem positive, but they definitely hide a negative side. In this case, athletes are strong and they can take care of themselves, right? I'm a wrestler. I'm a boxer, right? I'm strong. I can take care of myself. And yet, in wrestling and in boxing, we can see massive amounts of trusted advisor abuse. In terms of, orphanage, people who work at orphanages, they're good people and, they care about children. Boom, we don't have to do any oversight. Society is also responsible for the laws and the punishment. What are the laws? Who gets charged and who gets sentenced and how long? And, ultimately what we see with trusted advisor abuse is that there's often not criminal charges. Sometimes there are, after thousands of complaints of crimes. But, usually it goes underground into the civil court system or into private mediation with non-disclosure agreements, which we're a lot more aware of today, right? So you can see the organization being used once again to hide the crimes. In addition, strong religious and cultural messages about authority, trust, and obedience affect reporting. If I get out of line, I'm the troublemaker. So if anybody has any thoughts or comments, feel free. Otherwise, I'm going to bring Natasha back for case number 2.
Yeah, so for the trusted advisor abuse case number 2, we have police officers and the way they use their badge, their status in society to abuse others, especially because we see police officers as like these people who are supposed to protect their citizens, which is why we least expect them to be in these cases, right? So we have the former Oklahoma City police officer, Daniel Holtzclaw, was sentenced to 263 years in prison for raping and preying on African-American women. And his strategy was to target, low-income, marginalized communities, again, so his behavior can go unchecked. He wouldn't be caught. So his victims range from 17 to 57 years old. And it wasn't until his very final victim, which was a 57-year-old grandmother, who came forward. She reported the crime. She went to several media outlets, right? And that's when the investigation was launched, and it led to his conviction. And what we see here, as well as in other cases, is, again, the Oklahoma City Police Department, right? They failed to act on early signs of predatory behaviors. They ignored the initial complaints from other victims. And, we see that the investigations don't really begin until the damage is already done, right? Multiple victims have come forward. And yeah, that's what we have for case number 2.
Yeah. So we can see the societal stuff there, definitely. Police officers, who is going to be believed in these power imbalances. But another thing that we've got going on are community assumptions, right? So in this case, this is the community of Oklahoma City. I've been to Oklahoma City, and folks, I'm not throwing it under the bus. I love Oklahoma City. But this case did occur in Oklahoma City. So, in Oklahoma City, there were assumptions about police officers. There were community assumptions about who is going to be believed. And there were assumptions about the victims in that community too. That Oklahoma, culturally speaking, community-wise, is, focused more on believing police officers over, who might this woman be? This African-American woman who's marginalized, who might have a drug problem, right? Oh, and then I'm wondering, Natasha, can you imagine that this cop, before, during, and after his crimes, probably said something along these lines? What do you think? If nobody's going to believe you, you better not tell anybody. Nobody's going to believe you anyway.
Yeah, no, I definitely believe that. Because part of it is discrediting the victim. So that definitely could have happened.
Discrediting the victim using cultural assumptions that are shared within a community or an organization. So the cop was basically saying, I know this community is racist, lady, and they're not going to believe you, right? I know this community is heavy on law enforcement, public safety. I know they're going to believe me. So on that community or organizational level, we're talking about the police, force right here, to clarify the procedure to report and investigate, which would be, citizens of Oklahoma City. If you've had any interactions with law enforcement and you have any citizen complaints, here's the number, 1-800 report a cop, that this is actually a public information campaign to the citizenry of Oklahoma City. It sounds antagonistic to police, but it's actually the way to improve policing, to create a higher level of law enforcement that actually enforces laws rather than scoffs them or commits them in this case. So the agency, the police force here, the police force that employs, certifies, ordains, or otherwise oversees or includes the abuser is allowing both access and coverage. So the police department, there's the word, the police department gave that officer access to his preferred victims and then covered up his crimes. These entities within which the abuse has happened often have poorly managed oversight procedures and may be very focused on its status, procedure, ranking. Here's another thing that I often notice in these organizations. There is often fraud and financial abuse going on. So I'm going to ask people to go to the chat box to say this. If you're aware of one of these organizations where an egregious case of trusted advisor abuse occurred, are you also familiar with what that organization was doing, was hiding its financial shenanigans instead of actually policing its employees or investigating complaints? And as a matter of fact, I just saw a documentary. It wasn't a documentary. I think it was made into a movie about a Long Island school district guy. And, defrauding everybody but the nicest guy. So Natasha, did anybody put anything in the chat box? Has anybody ever actually seen that where trusted advisor abuse happens, the governance of that organization might actually be defrauding financially that organization?
There aren't any comments at the moment, but maybe, in a few seconds. Give people some time.
Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised, right? And it's interesting because, like, even within gymnastics with Larry Nassar, there was this other group called the Karolis. They were some Romanian gymnast trainers that defected from Romania during the Cold War and came over to Texas. But they had this kind of like financial machine going on. Here they have this financial machine. They want the money. Well, this Larry Nassar trusted advisor abuse is like, hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, right? You can have all the money, but I get all the victims. These preferences on status, prestige, ranking, or financial, fraud, these preferences sacrifice reporting and investigation for their positive reputation. And as a matter of fact, sometimes the trusted advisor can say, hey, you can't let anybody know about this because otherwise I'll tell this, and this. Okay. Let's get another case going, Natasha. How about this one?
Yeah, so on that topic of, finances, we have case number 3, which is different from the first 2 cases, right? Because the primary motivation here is money. A sober living home in Santa Ana, California was shut down after it was revealed that the owners were swindling a total of $3.2 million from medical insurance companies. What they did here was they preyed on, extremely susceptible individuals, these substance abuse patients. They had no regard for their health, their well-beings, their recovery. It was all about exploiting them and profiting off of their addictions. And in the end, they were investigated and they were caught, and they're currently serving time in prison. And they're guilty of money laundering, insurance fraud, lying on insurance applications, and trafficking patients.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, unfortunately, this is not an uncommon scenario where these drug treatment programs or sober living programs are really kind of mills of defrauding insurance companies. Florida is particularly rife because of their kind of laws. California is also susceptible to this kind of stuff. And you can even see within the sober living home, if a sexual predator got in there as a counselor or something like that, you could see, oh, great, I definitely want to work for, they can rip off all the money and I get access to victims, right? We're going to get, nobody's going to really pay attention to what is going on. So, you know, it's interesting that this even came up when it did, because where there's trusted advisor abuse, preying upon victims sexually, you know, there's often financial malfeasance. So that's just kind of an interesting coinkydink right there. Then we get into addressing things on the interpersonal or the relational level. So here, the organization should give everybody, right, the advisor, the mentor, as well as the advisee, the mentee, the patient, information about safety first, and what trusted advisor abuse is, what we're doing to stop it, and what you can do in case, unfortunately, are trying to stop it didn't work. Right? So trusted advisor abuse requires a relationship in order to have the abuse happen. And often others, the victims who the victim is connected to, are friends, patients, parents, but they can also be victims too. These individuals are often very glib, they're very charming, they're very personable individuals who people like having around. But once undermined, this process of trusting someone in authority then becomes problematic and part of the challenge for reporting an investigation. Meaning, if this guy was able to bamboozle my parents, who hasn't this guy bamboozled, right? If this faith minister is betraying my trust, why would this other faith minister not betray my trust? And why should I report? So one of the interesting things about this relational dynamic is that without information about trusted advisor abuse, the dynamic of trust actually becomes a silencing tool. And let me, Natasha, just go over a little more information. Maybe we can get to case number 4 before 11:30. But I do recognize that we, you know, had that technological snafu and lost some minutes. So I want to make sure that folks have all the information. I'll come back with you in a second, Natasha. So here's again looking at yourself, right? Which is increasing awareness right now about trusted advisor abuse. You know, honestly, it's very uncomfortable. This topic is not a comfortable topic. It's often, for me personally, very nauseating when I read these cases, hear about these cases, learn about this information. But yet, that is part of the process of awareness. It is our dislike of having to question people of trust, people in authority, people who have power, that keeps trusted advisor abuse alive. To increase your rights, to increase your information, I think that's supposed to say rather than instructions, your information about what it is and what you can do about it, and to increase awareness of the advocates that are out there who are there to help. Right? That again, remember, it's not 1, it's not 2, it's not 3. It has to be 4, 5, 10, 20, thousands of folks that come together. This is, you know, truly a political collective action that is required, but each individual has to reckon with themselves. And that we have these unique experiences and these individual strengths and challenges. So even though society and our culture and our communities and maybe even our relationships tells us things about ourselves, we're uniquely able to know what we need, and that is a strength. However, we also are required to, you know, inform people in our institutions and organizations about what safety is and what the process is to report, so that they can actually use their strengths. Explicit rights related to protection and investigation, right? You as an individual have responsibilities to yourself. secondarily to your responsibilities to the collective. That you noticing what's happening with you and telling somebody about it, and maybe even registering a complaint, is you protecting yourself. And to develop skills that are related to a voice, the word no, empowerment. Where does it come from? It comes from inside me, right? Not by virtue of things outside of me. And this concept of safe connections, right? Do you have a safe connection? Is there somebody you can go to if something like this does happen? Who do you know will believe you and will help you parse out the many complexities of all of this? So, first we're going to do this public information campaign, which is what our webinar is about. Our next level is your institution, organization interested in developing specific information processes and response to prevent trusted advisor abuse? And then our third level is to really increase, I guess I called it treatment, but whether that treatment is a criminal treatment or a civil treatment or a collective treatment or mental health treatment, like what is the diagnosis, what is the sentence, and what is the term, what is the treatment? So as I mentioned before, trusted advisor abuse is like a puzzle piece that now we can see, with Larry Nassar, there was aspects of domestic violence. He actually abused many children at their own homes. But there was definitely workplace harassment because he abused them in the facilities as well. There was definitely sexual assault going on, right? Often with children who had no sexual knowledge whatsoever. And there was also this trust manipulation going on. So, folks, I do realize that it's 11:30, so I want to pause here and ask if anybody has any questions. I think I'm going to go to Natasha, my final slide, and then if people are still around, we can kind of backfill for 15 minutes. But what I'm asking folks to do as a result of today's training is consider using the term trusted advisor abuse. A teacher who engages in sex with a student is committing trusted advisor abuse, right? A yoga instructor who says that you have to submit to their will is engaging in trusted advisor abuse. You can also decide to educate and inform your community, school board meetings, your town meetings, whatever kind of meetings might be happening nowadays. Do you have clear training, reporting, and investigation procedures in your organization? It's going to help your organization. It's not going to hurt your organization. It's really going to strengthen it, but it is uncomfortable, and I do recognize that. Send us links, newspaper links about cases. We're going to post it, as long as they've been reported in credible newspapers, we can put them on our website, and we're happy to do it. Not to be scandalous, but just to help people to see that this is actually very common. You can also write a letter to your local paper, legislators, or other universities. I'm going to ask Sydney to make sure that draft form letter that we've developed has been given to you all. For better oversight by boards, police oversight committees, others that are tasked with investigation and discipline. This is not to destroy organizations. It's to actually help them to become safer and more stable. And then refer people who have been abused, sorry about that typo, to our website, Stop Trusted Advisor Abuse. It's there. It's a public information campaign, and we'd like to help people to protect themselves and to complain and get rid of these perpetrators. So I'm going to pause now, Natasha, and ask if anybody has any questions and whether we should continue for 15 minutes or how we should do this.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone has any questions or concerns to put in the chat box, but for now, we're just gonna, put some links and some emails in the chat box for further information for all of you.
Right, and if you have to go, we totally understand. and our apologies. I think it was just one of those things that happened, and I really, really super duper apologize. So, Natasha, for those folks who are still there, and let me know when everybody is gone because I can't see that while I'm presenting. But let's talk about case number 4.
Okay, so for our last case, we have Dartmouth College professors. So 3 faculty members were fired for harassing and sexually assaulting their female graduate students. And there's a picture of them right there. William Kelly, Paul Whalen, and Todd Heatherton. And they hosted dinner parties in order to lure women and assault them under their supervision. So like, you know, an otherwise safe opportunity to like network with students, they use that as like a way to mask their inappropriate behavior and abuse their graduate students. And the women claimed they were punished if they rebuffed their advances. So with like threats to their academic and their professional careers. So it's a really terrible case. And then in the end, 7 women came forward and they hired a lawyer. They launched an investigation. And what they found was that the college failed to protect, just like other institutions, their students by mishandling their sexual assault reports and ignoring the years of predatory behavior of these professors, because there were complaints before and the college kind of swept them under the rug. And in the end, the professors were fired after the long investigation, and there was a $14 million settlement for the students.
Yeah. Well, it's a classic civil case, right? It's a classic non-criminally prosecuted case of groping, sexting, seducing, and raping, right? So, you know, these guys got away with it for a long time, and then ultimately they got away with it, you know, with their freedom. And, you know, what's so interesting about this case is that you can, you know, I can imagine that one guy started working there and started, you know, seeing, oh, wow, there are these soirees and alcohol is being, you know, provided to, you know, in this case, female students, but it could be, you know, whatever, you know, gender or sexual orientation, it doesn't even matter. So, you know, and then they sought perpetrative companionship. You know, they buddied up these 3 guys. They saw kindred spirits. They realized that there was safety in numbers. You know, again, you know, it's kind of nauseating to think about it, but these are the cases, and these are but 4 cases. We have so many. And really, to conclude, trusted advisor abuse reveals one of the greatest unspoken truths as humans. No one should be trusted blindly. That as we trust, we should also be able to skeptically assess what is going on minute by minute. And that's the unfortunate, you know, problem with really focusing on trust as such an awesome thing, is that we don't teach people not to trust blindly. We don't teach culturally that being suspicious or questioning process or precedent is actually a sign of an individual who wants to improve things, not a sign of an individual that wants to destroy things. So, Sydney, I want to bring you on, and here, let me just move to here. I want to bring you on, and first of all, thank you, Sydney. And just to ask you, any last thoughts about the information? And after that, Sydney, any last thoughts about the technology?
Thank you everyone for staying with us through the technology and hopping on a little late. We apologize for the difficulties. And thank you, Gabby, for the webinar. I found it incredibly informative. I, in general, through my exposure to trusted advisor abuse through you and through this webinar, have begun to have more and more faith in the power of naming something, and by naming it, being able to stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. It uncovers a hidden dynamic. Well, thank you very much, Sydney. And, you know, for everybody, sorry about that technology. we're going to try to, learn from our mistakes and offer another trauma trusted advisor abuse webinar in the future. So, Natasha, any final questions from folks? Any final thoughts about the information for you, and any follow-ups that you want people to do as a result of today's webinar?
Yeah, again, I just want to say thank you to everyone. And, again, as for some resources, please go to our website. I linked it in the chat box again. I don't think there's any more questions for now. And also feel free to email me with anything in relation to trusted advisor abuse, cases, questions, concerns, anything like that. So thank you again.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Sydney. And thank you, everybody who is on this line for making it through. And hopefully the information was good and will help us protect ourselves. With that, stay safe, everybody. Protect yourself out there with coronavirus as well. And I hope to see you soon. Bye.